A single mother thought he was just the intern who helped her in the elevator, but he was the millionaire owner of the building, a misunderstanding that changed their lives forever and sparked a romance full of surprises. Get ready, because this story will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. The March morning in New York City was arriving warm and humid, typical of the end of summer. Sarah Johnson adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder for the 10th time while observing the imposing glass towers of the financial district rising around her like giants of steel and concrete. The building in front of her, with its modern lines and mirrored facade, seemed a world completely different from the small studio apartment in East Side, where she had spent the last 3 years raising Ethan alone. "Mum, I want to go out." The shrill cry of the 2-year-old echoed through the marble lobby, causing some impeccably dressed executives to turn with barely concealed irritation. "Hold on, sweetheart, just a little longer," murmured Sarah, trying to calm her son while staring at the 5 cardboard boxes stacked next to the stroller. Her belongings fit in such a small space that it was almost embarrassing. A change of work clothes, a few used accounting books she had bought at a thrift store, Ethan's toys, and not much else. The doorman, a middle-aged gentleman in a crisp uniform, watched the scene with a mix of curiosity and slight impatience. Sarah realized she was blocking the flow of people coming in and out of the office building. Executives with leather briefcases, secretaries clicking their heels on the polished floor, delivery drivers. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry with a clear destination, while she felt like an intruder in that sophisticated environment. "Excuse me, do you need help?" The deep, gentle male voice made her turn abruptly. The man in front of her looked nothing like the other occupants of the building. He wore faded jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and worn Converse sneakers. He was about 35, with slightly tousled brown hair, as if he had just woken up, and green eyes that showed genuine sincerity. Sarah immediately noticed that his hands had visible calluses and dirt under his nails, definitely not the manicured hands of the executives, circulating around. I don't want to bother," she replied, trying to disguise the accent from her hometown that always became stronger when she was nervous. "Not at all. First rule of survival in New York. New Yorkers help New Yorkers." He smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Sarah's heart race unexpectedly. "Are you moving?" "Not exactly. I got a job as an accounting assistant at Smith & Associates on the 14th floor. I'm bringing some personal things to leave in my locker," she explained, feeling her cheeks flush. "Do you work here too?" "Yeah, let's say so," he replied, effortlessly picking up 2 of the heavier boxes. "What's your name?" "Sarah, and you?" "Ryan, but you can call me Rye." He gestured towards the elevators. "Shall we?" As they walked through the lobby, Ryan greeted several employees by name. "Hi, Mr. Johnson. How's your granddaughter?" he asked the doorman. "Mrs. Thompson, how did your knee surgery go?" he said to the janitor pushing a cleaning cart. Sarah watched, impressed. It was typical of an intern. They needed to build good relationships with all the building staff to establish themselves professionally. She had learned that lesson herself when she worked as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic in the suburbs. "Is Ethan your son?" Ryan asked as they entered the elevator, observing the boy who had finally stopped crying and was now studying the stranger with curiosity. "Yes, just the 2 of us," she replied, instinctively protective. It was always like this when she met someone new. The first piece of information they needed to know was that she was a single mother. Better to make it clear from the start to avoid disappointments or false expectations. "How old is he?" 2 and a half. "He's a handful, but he's the light of my life." Maternal pride shone through Sarah's voice, even amid her nervousness. The elevator stopped on the 14th floor, and Ryan helped her carry the boxes to the reception area of the accounting office. It was a typical corporate environment: grey cubicles, artificial plants, the familiar smell of brewed coffee mixed with printer paper. "Marie, you made it!" A blonde woman in her 40s approached with a warm smile. "I'm Jessica, remember? We talked on the phone, and this little guy must be Ethan." "Nice to meet you, Jessica. And thank you for the opportunity." Sarah tried to balance professionalism with the genuine gratitude she felt for landing that job. "Is this young man your—" Jessica looked at Ryan with evident curiosity. No. He just helped me with the boxes," Sarah hurried to explain, feeling her face heat up again. "Ryan Smith," he introduced himself politely. "I work in the building too." "How kind of you. How many floors?" "It varies. Today I'm mostly on the ground floor and the rooftop." Sarah frowned. What kind of internship allowed for such flexibility? Maybe he was an intern from a maintenance or landscaping company. That would explain the dirty hands. "Well, I need to let you work," Ryan said, checking a simple watch on his wrist. "Sarah, it was a pleasure meeting you. And you too, Ethan." The boy, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, shyly waved at Ryan, eliciting a genuine smile from the man. "Thank you for your help, Rye. You didn't have to go out of your way." "It was a pleasure. I'm sure we'll see each other around." After he left, Jessica turned to Sarah with a mischievous smile. "What a polite guy. And handsome too, don't you think?" "Jessica," Sarah protested, but she couldn't help but smile. "I'm here to work, not to flirt." "One thing doesn't exclude the other, dear. But let's get back to work. Let me show you your desk and explain your duties." The rest of the morning flew by as Sarah familiarized herself with the company's system, met her colleagues, and tried to keep Ethan entertained with the toys she had brought. The office had a flexible policy for working mothers. She could bring her son when necessary, until she secured a spot in a daycare. During lunch break, while heating her meal in the kitchen microwave, Sarah reflected on the morning. New York City was indeed a city of contrasts. In the same building where executives discussed million-dollar contracts, a kind intern stopped to help a single mother with her boxes. There was something about Ryan that piqued her curiosity. Perhaps it was the sincere way he looked into her eyes when he spoke, or the ease with which he connected with everyone, regardless of their social status. "Don't think about it, Sarah," she murmured to herself while stirring her instant noodles. "You have more important things to worry about." But as she returned to her desk, she couldn't help but glance out the window toward the rooftop of the building, where she could see a familiar figure tending to pots and plants. Ryan was there, now wearing an old t-shirt and gardening gloves, taking care of what appeared to be an improvised urban garden. "Landscaping intern," she thought, feeling a strange pang of curiosity about the man who had made her first morning at work a little less lonely. The March sun continued to shine brightly outside, but inside the air-conditioned office, Sarah Johnson was beginning a new phase of her life, unaware that casual encounter that morning would forever change the course of her story. The following weeks established a curious routine in Sarah's life. Every day, around 8:40 in the morning, she would take the elevator with Ethan in her arms and a bag full of toys, papers, and her lunch. And almost always, between the 5th and 8th floors, Ryan would enter the elevator. "Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, champ." He would greet her with the same genuine smile, addressing her first and then the little boy who had already started waving excitedly whenever he saw him. "Good morning, Ryan," she would reply, trying to ignore how her heart raced every time she heard his voice echoing in the small elevator space. Ryan always carried the same worn-out denim backpack, which seemed to have lived many adventures. Sometimes a silver thermos peeked out from it, and other times Sarah could distinguish notebooks or folders. Definitely college student material, she thought. He was probably attending some private college at night. Business administration or environmental engineering, from the way he spoke about plants. "How was your weekend?" Ryan asked on a Monday in April when the elevator momentarily stopped between the 6th and 7th floors. "Busy. I took Ethan to the park. He loves the geese by the lake," Sarah replied, adjusting the diaper in her bag. "And yours?" "I worked a bit on the rooftop. I'm testing a new technique for urban composting." His eyes lit up when he talked about it. "You know, it's amazing how it's possible to create a sustainable ecosystem even in such an urban environment." Sarah watched his hands as he gestured, always clean in the morning, but with visible calluses and small scratches that hinted at manual labor. His short nails invariably had traces of dirt underneath, even after washing. It was the kind of detail she had learned to notice. Hard-working, honest hands. "Are you studying agronomy?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Not exactly. It's more of a hobby that turned into a passion," he replied, running his hand through his brown hair. "And you? Have you always worked in accounting?" "Actually, no. I took a technical course a few years ago, but I never had the opportunity to work in the field. I've worked as a receptionist, saleswoman, attendant." She fell silent, realizing she was revealing too much about her unstable life. "Nothing wrong with that. New York is a city that forces us to be versatile," Ryan said naturally, with no judgment in his voice. "I bet you're great at what you do." The elevator stopped on the 14th floor, and Sarah exited with Ethan, feeling a strange warmth rise to her cheeks. There was something about the way Ryan spoke to her, without condescension, without pity, just with genuine interest, that left her disarmed. During the following week, their encounters became more frequent, not just in the elevator, but also in the hallways. Ryan seemed to know every corner of the building, moving freely between floors. Sometimes she saw him chatting with the cleaning staff, other times carrying pots or gardening tools. "He must intern for several companies," Jessica commented one Thursday afternoon, watching Ryan pass by the reception carrying a watering can. "What energy! I was like that at his age too." "Do you think he studies where?" Sarah asked, trying to sound casual while organizing a stack of invoices. "Probably at a private college, maybe Mackenzie or St. Jude's." Jessica shrugged. "Why the sudden interest in the young man's academic life?" "Just feminine curiosity," Sarah replied quickly, turning her attention back to the numbers on her computer screen. On that Friday, something different happened. Sarah was heading down to grab a coffee at the cafe on the ground floor when she found Ryan in the hallway of the 12th floor, animatedly talking to a man in a suit. "The idea is to create a system that is self-sustaining without reliance on external suppliers," Ryan was explaining, gesturing enthusiastically. "With the right species, we can reduce landscaping maintenance costs by up to 60%. The suited man listened attentively and took notes in a leather agenda. "Interesting, Ryan. Prepare a detailed budget and present it to me next week." When Ryan turned and saw her, his face lit up. "Hi, Sarah. What a coincidence." "Hi," she replied, confused. "I was just passing by." The man in the suit walked away after cordially greeting Ryan, and they were left alone. In the hallway, "I didn't know you took on clients," Sarah commented. "Oh, sometimes people consult me about landscaping projects. Nothing too formal," Ryan replied, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Were you heading down?" "I was going to grab a coffee. Want to join me?" "Sure." They went down together in the elevator in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. Sarah took the opportunity to observe him discreetly. Ryan had a handsome profile, a well-defined jawline, and there was a small, almost imperceptible scar on his left eyebrow. When he smiled, little wrinkles appeared at the corners of his eyes, making him seem older than he probably was. "Did Ethan end up with any colleagues?" he asked when they arrived at the cafe on the ground floor. "Jessica has her eye on him. She's a sweetheart," Sarah ordered. "Coffee and toasted bread. Do you want anything? Just a plain coffee?" Ryan insisted on paying the bill, ignoring her protests. "It's the least I can do after all the help you've given me." "What help?" Sarah asked, genuinely confused. "You let me join in on the elevator conversations with you two. For someone who spends all day working with plants, talking to real people is a luxury." She laughed, and it was the first time in a long while that she laughed completely spontaneously. "You talk as if you're a hermit." "Sometimes I do feel a bit like that," Ryan admitted, stirring sugar into his coffee. "And you? How are you adapting to work?" "Better than I expected. Jessica is an understanding boss, and the team is welcoming." Sarah bit into the toasted bread, feeling the melted cheese warm her mouth. "It's just been hard to juggle schedules with Ethan. The daycare center still doesn't have an opening." "That must be complicated. Do you have family here in New York?" "No. I moved from the countryside when I found out I was pregnant. My family, let's just say they didn't approve of my choices," she said, trying to keep her tone neutral. Ryan was silent for a moment, and Sarah feared she had shared too much information. But when he spoke, his voice was filled with understanding. "Family doesn't always understand our decisions, right? Sometimes we need to create our own family." There was something in the way he said that made Sarah suspect Ryan also had his own unresolved family issues. But she didn't ask. Not yet. "Exactly," she agreed, finishing her coffee. "Well, I better head back up. Jessica must be wondering where I've been." "Of course. Sarah," Ryan hesitated for a moment, "if you need anything, any emergency, I'm always around in the building. I keep my phone on 24/7. "That's very kind of you, Ryan. But I don't want to take advantage of anyone's kindness." "It's not kindness. It's—" He paused, as if about to say something important but changed his mind. "It's what neighbors do for each other." Riding the elevator alone, Sarah reflected on the conversation. There were layers to Ryan that she still couldn't decipher. The way he spoke about landscaping projects seemed much more professional than she would expect from an intern, and that offer of help sounded too genuine to be mere courtesy. When she reached the 14th floor, she found Ethan sleeping in Jessica's lap, who was flipping through a home decor magazine. "Everything okay here?" Sarah asked quietly. "Perfect. He even helped organize some papers." Jessica smiled. "So how was coffee with Ryan?" "How do you know that?" "Dear, this building is too small for secrets. Mr. Johnson at the front desk already told me you went down together." Sarah sighed. "It's just friendship, Jessica." "If you say so, but can I give you some advice from a more experienced woman?" "Sure." "Sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is to find someone who sees us for who we really are. And by the way that guy looks at you, he definitely sees you." Sarah returned to her desk, trying to ignore the advice, but the words echoed in her mind for the rest of the afternoon. When she left work at 5:30, she instinctively looked toward the rooftop and saw Ryan's familiar silhouette outlined against the orange sky of the New York evening. Maybe Jessica was right. Maybe there really was no harm in letting someone see her for who she truly was. Saturday morning at the New York City market was a spectacle in itself. Sarah walked among the colorful stalls with Ethan in the stroller, marveling at the variety of fruits, spices, and delicacies she had never seen in the small market of her hometown. The aroma of cod mixed with Arabic spices and the sound of merchants announcing their goods created a typically New York urban symphony. "Mom, look!" Ethan pointed excitedly at a stall filled with exotic fruits, dragon fruit, rambutan, star fruit that looked like golden stars. "Those are fruits from other countries. Hold on," Sarah explained, stopping so Her son could take a better look. One day we'll try all of them. It was an ambitious promise for someone who was still counting pennies to make ends meet for the week. But Sarah believed in giving Ethan hope, even if she sometimes doubted that she could provide all the experiences she dreamed of for her son. Sarah. Wow, what a coincidence. She turned and almost tipped the stroller in shock. Ryan was there, standing in front of a stall of Italian ingredients, holding a package of imported gorgonzola and a bottle of olive oil that, by the label, cost more than she spent on groceries for the week. "Ryan, hi!" Her heart raced. That physical reaction was becoming constant every time she saw him. "What are you doing here?" "Buying ingredients for lunch," he replied, looking slightly embarrassed by the expensive products in his hands. "My grandma, she's been a bit tired of hospital food, so I decided to make a special risotto for her." "Your grandma is in the hospital?" Sarah felt a genuine pang of concern. No. She lives with me, but she's undergoing chemotherapy. You know how it is. The palate becomes very sensitive, and you can only eat well-seasoned and special things." Ryan placed the ingredients into a sustainable fabric bag. "That's why I need to buy these more expensive items. It's what she can manage to swallow." Sarah's heart ached. She knew well the feeling of having to care for a loved one, of making financial sacrifices for love. When Ethan was born premature, she had even sold her grandma's earrings to pay for the medications that the health insurance wouldn't cover. "What a tough situation, Ryan. Has she been in treatment for a long time?" 3 months, but the doctors are optimistic," he smiled. But Sarah noticed the worry masked behind the optimism. "She's a stubborn Portuguese woman. She'll win this battle." "I'm sure she will. And how lucky she is to have a grandson like you to take care of her." Ryan fell silent for a moment, watching Ethan play with a fruit-shaped keychain that Sarah had bought to distract him. "And you? Doing the weekend grocery shopping?" "That's right. Ethan loves coming here. It's an adventure every week." Sarah pointed to the bag with tomatoes, onions, and chicken, the basics to survive until the next paycheck. "We were actually about to leave. How about having a pastry and sugarcane juice before you go?" "My treat," Ryan suggested. "My grandma always says that good food is even better when shared with loved ones." Sarah hesitated. Accepting invitations came at a cost, not financially but emotionally. Every kindness created an emotional debt. Every pleasant moment made it harder to maintain the barriers she had built around her heart. "Please," Ryan insisted, and there was something in the way he looked at her that made it impossible to refuse. 15 minutes later, they were sitting at one of the red plastic tables in the food court, Ethan in Sarah's lap, devouring a cheese pastry, while she and Ryan shared a meat pastry and another with palm hearts. This sugar-cane juice is perfect," Sarah commented, taking a sip of the cold drink. "The secret is in the cleanliness of the sugarcane and the ice," Ryan explained. "My grandma taught me to always pay attention to these details when eating out." "She seems like a very wise person." "She is. She came from Portugal 40 years ago, worked as a domestic worker her whole life to support the family. When she sees me wasting food or complaining about life, she tells stories from the time she went hungry in post-war Europe." He smiled fondly. "She keeps my feet on the ground." Sarah watched Ryan as he spoke about his grandma. There was genuine love and respect in his voice, the kind of family connection she had always envied. Her own parents had cut ties when she refused to marry Ethan's father to fix the situation, as they said. "Have you lived with her for a long time?" "Since I graduated from college. She was becoming frail and well, let's just say I didn't have many housing options." Ryan laughed, but there was a note of embarrassment in his voice. "Sharing rent with a Portuguese grandma has its advantages. She cooks better than any restaurant, and the stories she tells are better than any movie." Ethan started to get restless, and Sarah realized it was time to leave. But when she stood up to grab the cart, Ryan surprised her. "Sarah, can I ask you a somewhat personal question?" "Sure," she replied, though her heart raced at the possibility of him asking about Ethan's father. "Where did you study accounting? I saw you explaining a cash flow concept to Jessica yesterday, and it seemed very advanced for someone just starting in the field." Sarah felt her face heat up. She had expected a question about her personal life, not her professional competence. "I took a technical course at a community college in Eastside 4 years ago, and, well, I've always been good with numbers. In school, it was the only subject I was really interested in." "Just a technical course, with the knowledge you demonstrate." "I didn't have the opportunity to go to college. When Ethan was born, priorities changed," she replied, trying not to sound defensive. "I understand, but have you thought about going back to school? With your talent for numbers, you could do much more than just accounting assistant." It was the first time someone spoke about her professional talents as if they were real and valuable. In her family, they always said she wasted her intelligence getting into trouble. In her previous job, her boss treated her as if she were lucky to have the job, not as if she deserved to be there. "It's complicated. College is expensive, and I have Ethan to support. There are public options. City University, State University. The level of competition is very high. People like me can't compete with those who can afford expensive prep courses." Ryan was quiet for a moment, seeming to think of something important. "People like you. You know, single mom, no resources, public high school from a small town." "Sarah," he said, and there was something firm in his voice that made her look directly into his green eyes. "You are one of the smartest people I know, and I know plenty of people with diplomas on the wall and very little common sense." The compliment caught her so off guard that she was left speechless. Ethan chose that moment to start crying, wanting to get out of the cart, and the awkward pause was broken by the maternal need to calm her son. "I better go. Ethan is tired," she said, standing up and organizing the bags. "Of course, Sarah." Ryan hesitated. "Don't let anyone, not even yourself, convince you that you can't achieve what you want. Sometimes we just need the right opportunity." Walking back to the bus stop, Sarah reflected on the conversation. There was something about Ryan that made her question the limitations she had accepted as definitive. He spoke about her abilities as if they were obvious, as if she herself couldn't see her own potential. But what intrigued her the most was the way he had reacted to the high prices of Italian ingredients. For a college student doing an internship, that gorgonzola cost almost a whole day's work. Even with love for his sick grandma, it was a considerable investment. Maybe his family is better off, she thought as she boarded the crowded bus. Or maybe he works at more places besides the internship. But as the bus cut through the streets of New York towards East Side, a small seed of curiosity about Ryan began to germinate in her mind. There was more to him than met the eye. And for the first time in a long while, Sarah found herself genuinely interested in uncovering someone else's secrets. Not just interested, she was starting to truly care. May arrived in New York with that typical dry chill of autumn. Sarah had gotten used to the routine of casual encounters with Ryan, in the elevator in the morning, sometimes at the cafe on the ground floor, and always those moments when he appeared in the hallway, carrying gardening tools or chatting with other building staff. It was a Thursday when Jessica arrived at the office with a colorful flyer in hand and an excited smile on her face. "Sarah, do you have plans for Saturday night?" "The usual. Netflix and popcorn after Ethan goes to sleep. Why?" Sarah looked up from the spreadsheet she was checking. "Look at this." Jessica waved the paper. "The Neighborhood Association in Chinatown is organizing a mega special summer festival. There will be Japanese and Northeastern food, Live music and games, and the best part, it's free. Sarah took the flyer, observing the pictures of colorful lanterns, food stalls, and families having fun. It had been years since she attended a real summer festival. The last one had been in her hometown, before she got pregnant, when she still believed life would follow a predictable script. "I don't know, Jessica. Ethan is still very young, and I don't know anyone there." "Exactly why you should go. You need to meet new people, have some fun." Jessica sat on the edge of her desk. "You spend the whole week working and your weekends at home. That's not a life for a 32-year-old woman. And who will take care of Ethan? Take him with you. Kids love summer festivals, popcorn, cotton candy, games. It'll be quite an experience for the little guy." Sarah was tempted. The truth was, she felt lonely, but she had gotten so used to isolation that going out for social events seemed almost daunting. "I'll think about it," she said, handing back the flyer. "Think nothing. You're going, end of story. I'll come pick you guys up at 7. On Friday, when she was heading down for lunch, Sarah ran into Ryan in the elevator carrying a box of plant seedlings. "Hi, Sarah. How's Ethan?" "Hi, Ryan. He's fine. Stayed home with the neighbor today. I got a discount at the daycare center, and he starts there on Monday," she replied, feeling proud of having solved yet another practical issue of life on her own. "That's great news. It must be a relief for you." "Yes, very much. And you? More plants for the rooftop?" "Actually, they're for a summer festival happening in Chinatown tomorrow. I'm helping to decorate the space," Ryan smiled. "You're not going by any chance, are you?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Will you be there?" "I will. I helped plan the landscaping for the event. Nothing too elaborate, just some planters with typical plants from the countryside to set the mood." He seemed to hesitate for a moment. "If you go, it would be nice to run into familiar faces there." "Jessica is pushing me to go," Sarah admitted, laughing. "She says I need a social life." "Jessica is right. And what about Ethan? Are you taking him?" "I will. He's never been to a real summer festival." The elevator stopped at the ground floor, and they walked together towards the cafe. "So, see you there?" Ryan asked, and there was something in his voice that made Sarah suspect the meeting wouldn't be as casual as it seemed. "I think so." Saturday arrived cloudy, but without rain. Sarah spent the entire afternoon picking out an outfit, a complicated task considering her limited wardrobe. She ended up opting for dark jeans and a floral blouse she had bought on sale. Nothing too elaborate, but it made her feel feminine. Ethan was super excited about the little guy outfit she had improvised with a borrowed plaid shirt and patched jeans. "Mom, I'm going to eat so many sweets," he announced as she fixed his hair. "In moderation, hold on. Otherwise, you'll get sick." At exactly 7, Jessica honked downstairs. On the way to Chinatown, she didn't stop talking about the importance of Sarah opening up to the world and giving happiness a chance. The festival was beautiful. The open space between the buildings had been transformed with colorful flags, balloons, and various stalls, offering a delicious but unusual mix of Japanese and northeastern foods. The aroma of stir-fried noodles mingled with the scent of peanut candy and hot spiced drink, creating a unique atmosphere that only New York could provide. Ethan was mesmerized by everything. The paper lanterns, the live music, the number of kids running around. Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in a long while, watching her son enjoy himself without worries. "How about some stir-fried noodles?" Jessica suggested. "I heard the folks from the Midnight Market are running that stall." They were in line when Sarah felt a hand lightly touch her shoulder. "Sarah?" She turned and found Ryan, but a Ryan different from the one she was used to seeing. He was wearing a light blue dress shirt rolled up to the elbows, dark jeans, and a smile that seemed more relaxed than usual. Sarah was accompanied by a middle-aged couple, a tall Japanese man and a blonde woman who waved cordially. "Ethan, you really came!" Her heart raced again, but this time she didn't try to ignore the feeling. "I said I would be here. Jessica, these are my friends, Mr. Tanaka and Mrs. Thompson. They helped organize the event." "Nice to meet you," Sarah greeted the couple, who showed immediate affection for Ethan. "What a lovely boy," Mrs. Thompson exclaimed. "How old is he?" 2.5, Sarah replied proudly. "The age of discovery. My grandson is the same age. They can be quite a handful." Mr. Tanaka laughed. After the introductions, Jessica conveniently disappeared to check out the space, leaving Sarah alone with Raphael and Ethan. They bought food and found an empty table near the stage where a trio was playing country music. "Are you enjoying the party?" Raphael asked as Ethan devoured a piece of corn cake. "Very much. I haven't been to a summer festival in years. It's different from my hometown, but it has the same warm atmosphere. What were the festivals like in your town? Smaller? Simpler? Everyone knew each other, you know? It was in the main square, with the church in the background and the town band playing." Sarah smiled nostalgically. "My grandma made coconut candy, and I sold it to help pay for my school supplies." "Do you miss it?" "Some things, yes. The simplicity, maybe. Here in New York, everything is more complicated, more rushed." She watched Ethan trying to grab a popcorn that had fallen on the floor. "But there are also more opportunities. For him, especially." Raphael was quiet for a moment, observing the activity around them. The sound of foro mixed with conversations in Japanese and English created a unique soundtrack. "Sarah, can I tell you something?" "Sure." "I've have difficulty with social events. I always feel a bit out of place, like I don't know how to act properly." He nervously fiddled with the napkin. "But today, talking with you, I feel normal, like I can be myself." The confession took her by surprise. Raphael always seemed so at ease, so confident at the building's gatherings. "But you're super sociable. You know everyone, talk to everyone." "It's different. At the building it's work, it's functional, but this—" He gestured towards the families dancing, the couples sitting on benches. "This is real life, intimacy, and I've never been very good at that." There was a vulnerability in his confession that touched something deep in Sarah's heart. She also felt out of place at most social events, always the single woman with a child, always the one who didn't fit into couples or childless singles groups. "I feel that way sometimes too," she admitted. "Like everyone. Received a manual on how to live that I never managed to read." Raphael smiled, and it was a different smile, more genuine, more intimate. "Maybe we can figure out together how to do it." At that moment, the band announced it was time for the quadrilla, and Ethan clapped excitedly. Without thinking twice, Sarah stood up and extended her hand to Raphael. "Shall we dance?" He hesitated for a second, then took her hand with a smile that made Sarah's heart race. "Let's go." The quadrilla was a fun chaos of wrong steps, laughter, and Ethan running between the rows, trying to imitate the adults. Raphael turned out to be surprisingly good at dancing, guiding Sarah through the movements with confidence and humor when they missed the timing. When the music ended and they returned to the table, breathless and laughing, something had changed between them. A barrier had fallen, an intimacy had been born. "Thank you," Sarah said, still holding his hand. "Why?" "For reminding me that I can have fun, that I don't always have to be just the responsible mom." Raphael squeezed her hand gently. "You are so much more than just a responsible mom. Sarah, you're an incredible woman." That night, on the way home with Jessica holding Ethan, who was asleep, Sarah finally admitted to herself what she had been denying for weeks. She was falling for Raphael. And for the first time since Ethan was born, that didn't scare her. June arrived in New York with that dry cold that made New Yorkers pull coats out of the closet and complain about the low humidity. Sarah had settled into a comfortable routine: work, daycare to pick up Ethan, some casual meetings with Raphael at the building, and the growing feeling that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be happy again. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. Sarah woke up at 3 a.m. to Ethan crying inconsolably in the crib next to her bed. The cry wasn't the usual whiny or hungry child. It was a sound of suffering that made her blood run cold instantly. "Hold on, what's wrong?" she murmured, picking her son up. His skin was burning. "Oh my God, you're on fire with fever!" Ethan was trembling and crying, refusing the bottle of water she offered. Sarah rushed to the bathroom and grabbed the digital thermometer. 104 degrees. Her heart raced with the familiar panic of a single mom facing a medical emergency alone. "Calm down, Sarah. Think," she murmured to herself, trying to remember the protocol she had memorized for situations like this. Lukewarm bath, fever reducer, watch if the fever went down. But 104 degrees was too dangerous for home remedies. She gave the children's fever reducer and placed Ethan in a basin with lukewarm water. But the fever wouldn't budge. The little boy kept moaning, and Sarah realized he was having difficulty breathing. Emergency. A room. Now. The problem was how to get there. It was 3:30 in the morning, she didn't have a car, and the taxi fare would compromise the week's budget. But there was no choice. Ethan needed urgent medical attention. That's when she remembered the crumpled paper in the kitchen drawer, the emergency contact list for the building that the landlord had distributed last month. Ryan had offered to help any resident in difficult situations and left his number on the list. With trembling hands, she dialed the number. "Hello?" His voice sounded alert, as if he hadn't been sleeping. "Ryan, it's Sarah. Sorry to call at this hour, but Ethan has a very high fever and I need to take him to the emergency room. Could you give me a ride?" "Of course, I'm on my way to pick you up. What's the address again?" She provided the address in East Side, and Ryan said he would arrive in 20 minutes. Sarah dressed Ethan in light clothing, grabbed the documents and health insurance card, and went downstairs to wait at the entrance of the housing complex. 17 minutes later, a silver Civic stopped in front of the building. Ryan jumped out quickly, wearing a t-shirt and jeans, as if he had dressed in a hurry. "How is he?" was the first thing he asked, noticing Ethan in her arms. 40-degree fever. He's groaning and having trouble breathing," Sarah replied, getting into the car. The interior was clean and organized, with the scent of a new car. "City Hospital is closer. Let's go there," Ryan said, starting the car and driving off quickly but carefully. During the ride, he chatted softly with Ethan, trying to distract him. "Hey there, champ. You'll be better in no time. I'll take you to see the plants on the rooftop when you're feeling good again." Sarah watched Ryan driving confidently through the deserted streets of New York. There was something reassuring about his presence, a feeling that she was no longer alone, facing the crisis. "Ryan, thank you for coming. I know it's a lot to ask." "Sarah, don't say that. You would do the same for me." At the hospital, Ryan insisted on staying throughout the entire treatment. Ethan was diagnosed with a viral respiratory infection, nothing serious, but it required specific medication and observation. They spent 4 hours in the pediatric emergency room, waiting for tests and for the fever to subside. During the wait, sitting in the blue plastic chairs of the hospital, Ryan shared more about his life. "My grandma went through a similar situation when I was 7. Severe pneumonia. She was hospitalized for 2 weeks," he said, watching Ethan finally sleeping in Sarah's arms. "I remember being terrified at the thought of losing her." "Did you live with her since you were little?" "Since I was 5. My parents—" Ryan hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. "My parents traveled a lot for work. It ended up being more practical for me to live with her." There was something in the way he said that made Sarah suspect the story was more complicated than Ryan was letting on. But she didn't press. She had learned to respect people's secrets. And after she got sick, I realized how important she is to me. She raised me, taught me everything I know about responsibility and character. He smiled fondly. That's why I make it a point to take good care of her now. It's my way of giving back. At 7 in the morning, Ethan was finally better. The fever had dropped to 37 degrees. He had managed to drink a little water and even smiled when Ryan made funny faces. You can go home. Continue with the medication every 6 hours and come back if the fever goes above 38.5 again, the pediatrician advised. On the way back, Ethan was sleeping in the back seat in a car seat that Ryan had in the car. Do you have a car seat? Sarah asked, curious. Oh, yeah, a friend left it in the car the other day, Ryan replied quickly, but she noticed he seemed slightly uncomfortable with the question. When they arrived at her building, Ryan insisted on coming up to help settle Ethan. You need to rest too. It was a long night, he said, observing the small but organized apartment. It was the first time someone besides Jessica had entered her home. Sarah felt slightly embarrassed by the simplicity of the place. A sofa bed where she slept, Ethan's crib in a corner, a formica table serving as both an office and dining table. Sorry for the mess. I wasn't expecting visitors. What mess? Everything looks tidy, Ryan said genuinely. It's cozy. He helped put Ethan in bed and waited for Sarah to give the medication. When she returned from the kitchen, she found Ryan looking at the photos hanging on the wall, her pregnant, Ethan as a newborn, the two of them in a park. You were very young when he was born, Ryan commented. 29, not that young, but... She sighed. I wasn't prepared to be a single mom. No one is prepared to be a dad or mom, I think. We learn along the way. There was something in the way he said that made Sarah look at him curiously. Do you think about having kids? Ryan was silent for a moment. I do. But first, I need to sort some things out in my life. Financial stability, serious relationship. The financial aspect is complicated indeed. Raising a child is expensive, Sarah agreed, wondering how much an intern earned and if it would be enough to support a family. Sarah. Ryan turned to her, and there was something intense in his green eyes. Can I ask you something? Sure. What happened to Ethan's dad? The question she always feared, but knew would come sooner or later. When he found out about the pregnancy, he said he wasn't ready to be a dad, that he was too young, had dreams to fulfill. Sarah felt the familiar pang of pain and anger. He offered money for me to resolve the situation, as he put it. When I refused, he disappeared. Ryan fell silent, and she noticed the contained anger in his expression. What a coward, he said quietly. At first it hurt a lot. But today, I see it was for the best. Ethan doesn't need a dad who didn't want him. He lost the chance to know two amazing people. The way Ryan said that, the sincerity in his voice, made Sarah feel something warm in her chest. Thank you for everything, for the ride, for staying at the hospital. Don't judge. There's no need to thank me, Sarah. That's what people who care do for each other. He was about to say something else, she realized. Something more intimate, more meaningful. But he held back. When Ryan left, Sarah lay down next to Ethan, watching her son's steady breathing. The night of terror had passed, but something had definitely changed. Ryan was no longer just the kind intern she encountered in the elevator. He had become someone she could trust, someone who would be there in difficult times. And for the first time since Ethan was born, Sarah allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to share life's responsibilities with someone. what it would be like not to always face crises alone. It was a dangerous thought, but incredibly tempting. July brought with it the harsh winter of New York, freezing mornings, grey skies, and that fine drizzle that soaked more than heavy rain. Sarah had gotten used to wearing a coat inside the office and seeing Ryan always in a denim jacket over his t-shirt when they met in the elevator. After the night at the hospital, something had changed between them. It wasn't just the intimacy created by the emergency situation, but a sense of mutual trust that made conversations deeper, silences more comfortable. Ethan, fully recovered, always asked for Uncle Ryan when he came home from daycare. It was a Thursday when Sarah decided to have lunch outside the building. The month had been tight financially. Ethan's doctor visits and medications had consumed a significant part of the budget, but she felt the need for some fresh air and movement. She walked through the streets of the financial district until she found a simple diner 2 blocks from the office, the kind of place frequented by office workers and employees from smaller companies. She ordered an economical lunch special and sat at a red formica table near the window. That's when she saw him. Ryan was sitting at a corner table, wearing the same denim jacket as always, but in front of him was an impressive collection of detailed architectural projects, blueprints, professional certifications, and budgets that she could distinguish even from a distance. He hadn't seen her yet, too focused on the conversation with a suited man who was pointing at documents and taking notes in an expensive leather planner. Sarah could hear fragments of the conversation. The initial investment of $120,000 for the complete implementation of the landscaping project, Ryan explained, pointing to a blueprint. This includes an automated irrigation system, selection of native species, and a 2-year maintenance schedule. $120,000. Sarah almost choked on her food. That was the kind of budget that large companies approved, not small intern projects. "And what about sustainability?" asked the suited man. "Essential. All species were selected considering the urban microclimate of New York, reducing water consumption by 50% and creating microhabitats for local wildlife," Ryan replied, with a professional confidence that Sarah had never seen before. That's when he looked up and saw her. For a fraction of a second, she noticed something that seemed like embarrassment on his face, as if he had been caught doing something he shouldn't. "Sarah!" He quickly stood up, putting the papers into a leather folder. "What a coincidence!" She approached the table, still processing what she had witnessed. "Hi, Ryan. Sorry to interrupt. I was having lunch over there and saw you." Sarah greeted the suited man, who introduced himself as the director of a construction company. "Ryan here is one of the most competent landscape architects I know," the man commented. "Young, but with an innovative vision of urban sustainability. Landscape architect, not intern. A qualified landscape architect with clients, 6-figure budgets." After the man left, Ryan looked visibly uncomfortable. "Do you want to sit? We can talk a bit," he offered, but there was nervousness in his voice. "Sure." Sarah sat down, trying to process the revelation. "So you are a landscape architect, not an intern." Ryan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she had learned to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "It's complicated, Sarah." "Complicated how?" "I graduated just 2 years ago. I started as an intern, but I got some clients and things grew faster than I expected." Sarah observed the leather folder, the watch that she now realized was more expensive than she had imagined, the confident way he had conducted the business meeting. "Do you have your own e-company?" "Small, very small," Ryan hurried to say. "It's just me and a few outsourced partners. Nothing too elaborate." But Sarah had worked with numbers long enough to know that budgets of $120,000 were not nothing too elaborate. It was the kind of contract that could sustain a company for months. "Why didn't you tell me before? I thought you were an intern. Ryan sighed deeply. Because when I met you, you were clearly nervous in that corporate environment, intimidated, and I didn't want you to feel, I don't know, embarrassed for talking to someone who might have a better position. Did you lie to protect me? I didn't exactly lie. I just didn't correct a wrong assumption. Sarah fell silent, trying to understand how she felt about that revelation. On one hand, there was a strange logic to Ryan's attitude. She really did feel intimidated by large social differences. On the other hand, there was something paternalistic in his decision to protect her from information that was his to share. Sarah, say something. Are you mad at me? I don't know if I'm mad. I'm confused, she replied honestly. What is your financial situation really like, Ryan? Stable. I'm not rich, but I'm managing to establish myself in the market. I pay the bills, help support my grandma, and I can save a little every month. It was more than Sarah could do. Much more. The difference between them had just become much more evident than she had imagined. And where do you live again? Ryan, he hesitated again. With my grandma, in West Village. West Village, one of the most desirable neighborhoods in New York. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The difference between a house in West Village and an apartment in East Side was vast. Ryan, why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know the truth, and because I like you, Sarah. A lot. And I don't want our friendship to be based on a lie. The confession caught her off guard. Ryan liked her, not just as the friendly single mom he met in the elevator, but as a woman, and she had just discovered that he had a much more stable financial life than hers. I like you too, she admitted softly. But this changes things, doesn't it? Why would it change anything? Because now I know you could be with anyone, women of your social class with a college degree, without kids complicating things. Sarah, stop! Ryan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Do you think I care about those things? Everyone cares, Ryan. You might not admit it, but you do. I care that you're intelligent, hard-working, a dedicated mom, and a genuine person. I care about how you treat people, how you face challenges, how you smile when you're truly happy. His words went straight to her heart, but Sarah was afraid to believe. And I care that you were honest with me about your life, your struggles, your dreams, Ryan continued. While I wasn't completely honest with you. Why not? Because I've been in relationships where people were more interested in my financial stability than in me. And when I met you for the first time in a long time, I found someone who saw me as a person, not as an opportunity. Sarah understood the logic, but she still felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. I need to process all of this, Ryan. I understand. Just don't let this ruin what we're building. Okay, I'm still the same person you met. Are you? I am. The only difference is that now you know I can take you out to dinner at a decent restaurant every now and then. Sarah laughed, and it was a genuine laugh despite the confusion in her head. A decent restaurant? How luxurious. Sarah, can I ask you something? Sure. If I were really an intern making minimum wage, would you still be interested in me? The question was direct. Sarah thought honestly before answering. Yes. In fact, it would be easier. I wouldn't have to deal with this feeling of not being good enough. So the problem isn't that I have money. It's you thinking you don't deserve someone who has money. Ryan had hit the nail on the head, and Sarah hated when people could read her insecurities so accurately. Maybe. Just know that you deserve much better than a freshly graduated landscaper who still lives with his grandma. Even being a single mom without a college degree? especially being a single mom without a college degree who raised an amazing child on her own and managed to establish herself in a new city, starting from scratch. Walking back to the office, Sarah reflected on the conversation. Ryan was right about one thing. She really felt inferior, unworthy of attention from someone with a stable financial situation. But he was also right about another thing. If he were really an intern, it would be easier to believe that his interest was genuine. Now she had to deal with the scary possibility that a successful, handsome and kind man was actually interested in her, and that maybe, just maybe, she deserved that luck. It was a revolutionary concept for someone who had spent the last 3 years believing she deserved only crumbs from life. August arrived with the coldest weather of the year in New York. The mornings were cold enough to see her breath, and Sarah had finally bought a used wool coat from a thrift store to face the temperature inside the air-conditioned office. Since the conversation at the diner, a strange tension had settled between her and Ryan. It wasn't exactly discomfort, but a new awareness of their mutual attraction that was now openly declared. The encounters in the elevator continued, but charged with a different electricity, glances that lasted a little longer, smiles that hid deeper meanings. Ethan, completely oblivious to the adult complications, kept asking about Uncle Ethan and getting excited whenever he saw him. "Mom, when is Uncle Ethan coming over again?" he asked one Tuesday morning while Sarah was getting him ready for daycare. "He only came because you were sick, honey. It was a special situation. But I like him. He's funny." Sarah liked him too. More than it would be wise to admit, considering the complications that the difference in financial situations had created. It was Thursday when Ryan surprised her with an unexpected invitation. "Sarah, do you have plans for Saturday night?" he asked when they met in the hallway on the 12th floor. "The usual Netflix and popcorn after Ethan goes to sleep. Why?" "I wanted to take you out to dinner, to a nice place where we can really talk." Ryan seemed nervous, running his hand through his hair. "Nothing too formal, but a real date." Sarah's heart raced. A real date. Not a casual meet-up at the building's diner or a community party, but something planned, intentional. I don't know, Ryan. Ethan. Claudia already offered to watch him. I talked to her yesterday," he smiled. "She said you need to go out and have some fun." Of course, Claudia was involved in the conspiracy. "Where were you thinking of going?" "There's an Italian restaurant in Little Italy that serves homemade food. Nothing too fancy, but the food is excellent, and the atmosphere is cozy." Sarah hesitated. The last time she had been to a real restaurant, Ethan was excited about the prospect of spending the night at Aunt Jessica's house, who had promised pizza and a movie. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said when Sarah finished getting ready. "Thank you." "Sweetheart." At 7 o'clock sharp, Ryan honked downstairs. When Sarah came down, he was leaning against the Civic, wearing a navy blue dress shirt and dark jeans. Simple, yet elegant. "You look stunning," were his first words, and there was genuine sincerity in his admiration. "Thank you. You look great too." The restaurant was located on a quiet street in Little Italy, in a renovated old mansion that retained its original charm. Inside, small tables with checkered tablecloths, warm lighting, and the unmistakable aroma of garlic and basil filled the air. "It's perfect," Sarah commented, observing the cozy atmosphere. "I thought you would like it. It has that Italian homey vibe, you know." They were seated at a corner table near a window overlooking a small indoor garden. Ryan ordered an appetizer of bruschetta and suggested they share, as the portions were generous. "Tell me more about your company," Sarah said, after the waiter took their orders. Cheese ravioli for her, mushroom risotto for him. "It's a small operation. Just me and 2 partners who handle the technical side. Irrigation, installation, and a few freelancers for maintenance. Ryan took a sip of the wine they had chosen. We started 2 years ago, right after I graduated. We're still establishing ourselves, but it's been going well. How do you get clients? Referrals, mostly. A good project leads to 3 more. And there's the sustainability aspect. It's becoming a trend in New York, so companies are investing more in eco-friendly landscaping. Sarah noticed his enthusiasm when he talked about work. It was clear Ryan loved what he did. He wasn't just making money. And your education? Where did you go to college? Columbia, architecture and urban planning with a specialization in landscaping. He seemed to hesitate. Sarah, can I tell you something? Sure. In the beginning, when you mistook me for an intern, I thought about correcting you, but then I realized how much more comfortable you were with me thinking we were, I don't know, on the same social level. And were we? Not financially, but in everything that really matters, yes. The bruschetta arrived, and they paused their conversation to eat. The bread was crispy, the tomato fresh, and the seasonings just right. Your turn, Ryan said. Tell me about your family. You mentioned they didn't approve of your choices. Sarah sighed. It was a painful subject, but Ryan had been honest about his life. My parents are very traditional, religious, conservative. When I told them I was pregnant and wasn't going to marry Ethan's father, it was a scandal. She swirled the wine in her glass. My mum said I was dishonoring the family. My dad said if I didn't marry, I was no longer his daughter. That's absurd. To them, it made sense. A single woman with a child in my town is still gossip material. They thought I should accept a loveless marriage just to save face. And you chose to come to New York alone. I did. It was scary, but it was the right decision. Sarah smiled. Ethan didn't deserve to grow up in an environment where he would be seen as his mother's mistake. You were very brave, or very stubborn, depends on your point of view. The main course arrived, and they both focused on the food for a few minutes. The ravioli was perfect, the homemade tomato sauce, and the cheese melting in their mouths. Sarah, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Have you had any other relationships since Ethan was born? The question caught her off guard. No, I mean nothing serious. A few dates that didn't work out. Why didn't they work out? Several reasons. Some men didn't want to take on the responsibility of a relationship with a single mom. Others were only interested in casual fun. She took a sip of wine. And some I pushed away myself because I couldn't trust. And now, can you trust? Sarah looked into his green eyes, trying to read the intentions behind the question. In you, I'm learning. It's a start. They shared a dessert, tiramisu that was divine, and talked about future plans. About Sarah's dreams of going to college, about Ryan's projects to expand the company. When they left the restaurant, it was already past 10 at night and cold. Ryan offered his jacket, which she accepted, feeling his scent on the fabric. Thank you for the evening. It's been a long time since I felt this way, Sarah said when they reached the car. This way how? Like a woman, not just as a mom, a worker, a person with responsibilities. Just a woman. Ryan stopped before opening the car door and turned to her. Sarah, you are the most incredible woman I know. A dedicated mom, a competent professional, an upright person, all in one. You don't have to choose just one of those things to be. He was very close now, and Sarah could feel the warmth of his body despite the cold night. Ryan, can I kiss you? Instead of answering, she moved closer, lifting her face. The kiss was gentle. At first, hesitant, then more intense when she responded. There were months of accumulated tension in that moment, months of carefully controlled attraction finally finding expression. When they separated, both were breathless. Wow, Sarah murmured. Wow. Ryan agreed, smiling. On the way to pick up Ethan at Jessica's house, they fell into silence, but it was a comfortable silence. For the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to simply enjoy the feeling of being courted, desired, valued. Sarah, Ryan said as they stopped in front of Jessica's building. That wasn't just a dinner between friends. For me, it was a real date. It was for me too. So, can we have more? Sarah smiled, feeling something she had forgotten existed, hope in love. We can. The end of October arrived in New York, with that humid heat that precedes the rainy season. The city's trees began to bloom, painting the jacarandas purple and filling the air with the scent of yellow ipe flowers. For Sarah, it was as if nature itself was celebrating this new phase of her life. In the past few weeks, she and Ryan had officially become a couple. There were no grand declarations or eternal promises, but a natural progression of dates, dinners, afternoons in the park with Ethan, and the growing feeling that she had finally found someone who saw her as a whole, woman, mother, professional, dreamer. Ethan adored Ryan, who had become a constant presence on weekends. They went to the zoo, had picnics in Central Park, and Ryan had started teaching the boy about plants in the small garden he cultivated on the rooftop of the building. It was a Monday when everything changed. Sarah was organizing invoices at her desk when Jessica approached with a strange expression on her face. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. It might be silly, but—" "What is it?" "You know that David from finance is a bit of a gossip, right?" Jessica pulled up a chair. "Yesterday, he told me he found out who the real owner of this building is." Sarah looked up from her spreadsheet. "And? Well, we always heard it was some rich businessman nobody knew personally. But David saw some documents from the property management and—" Jessica hesitated. "The name that appears as the owner is Ryan Smith." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Ryan Smith? Yes, compound surname. And there's more. It's not just this building. There are 6 commercial buildings in the area, all in his name." Sarah felt the world spin around her. Ryan was not just a prosperous landscaper. He was the owner of the building where she worked, owner of multiple commercial buildings in the financial district. "Are you sure it's the same Ryan?" "David said he checked the ID. It's him." Jessica touched her arm. "Sarah, you didn't know?" "No, I didn't know." "Sweetheart, does this change anything?" It changed everything. Completely everything. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but her head spun with the revelation. Ryan hadn't just lied about being an intern. He had admitted that he was a millionaire, that he was literally the owner of the building where they met. How many other lies had he told? Was the house in West Village really his grandma's, or was it his? Was the landscaping company really small, or just a hobby for someone who didn't need to work? At 5 in the afternoon, as she was leaving the office, she found Ryan in the elevator, as always. "Hi, sweetheart. How was your day?" he asked, trying to kiss her cheek. Sarah stepped back. "I need to talk to you, in private." Ryan immediately sensed that something was wrong. What happened? "Not here." They went to the coffee shop on the ground floor, which was almost empty at the end of the afternoon. Sarah chose a secluded table and sat across from him. "I found out something today," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What?" "You are the owner of this building." Ryan paled. For a moment it seemed like he was going to deny it, but then he sighed heavily. "Who told you?" "Does it matter? The question is, why didn't you tell me?" "Sarah, it's complicated." "Complicated how, Ryan? Or should I say Ryan Smith?" The bitterness in her voice was palpable. "How many buildings do you own? How many millions?" Ryan ran his hands over his face. 6 buildings. I don't know how many millions exactly. I've never bothered to calculate. The coldness of his response made Sarah even angrier. He never bothered to calculate. While she counted pennies to buy medicine for Ethan, he didn't even bother to know how much money he had. And the landscaping company? Is that also a lie? No, that part is true. The company exists. I really work there. Why? Why would someone with so much money work? Ryan was silent for a moment. Because I inherited all this from my grandfather when I was 22. I didn't do anything to deserve it. The landscaping company is what I built myself. Your grandfather? He bought properties his whole life. When he died, he left everything to me because my parents... He hesitated. Because my parents were more interested in traveling the world spending money than in family responsibilities. Sarah tried to process the information. And the sick Portuguese grandma? That part is true. She worked for my family her whole life, raised me when my parents weren't around. When my grandfather died, I made sure to take care of her. But she's not your blood grandmother. She's my heart grandma, the only real family I have. There was genuine pain in Ryan's voice, but Sarah was too furious to be moved. Ryan, you lied to me for months. You made me believe we were on the same social level, that you understood my financial struggles, that I understand your struggles. How? How can someone who has never been in need understand what it's like to count coins to buy milk? What it's like to have to choose between medicine and food? Sarah, please let me explain. Explain what? How you had fun pretending to be poor with me. How it was funny to see the little employee struggling. Falling for the boss without knowing who he was? The words came out with more venom than she intended, but the pain of betrayal was too intense. It was never that, Ryan said softly. Never. Then what was it? It was fear, Sarah. Fear of you seeing me as a financial opportunity instead of seeing me as a person. So you thought it was better to deceive me. I thought it was better for you to know me for who I really am before knowing how much money I have. And who are you really? Because now I don't know anymore. Ryan reached out his hand across the table, trying to touch hers, but Sarah pulled away. I'm the same man you met. The same one who helped you at the hospital, who dines with you, who plays with Ethan. You are the same man who lied to me for months. I didn't lie. I omitted. It's the same thing, Ryan. They fell silent, watching each other across the table. Sarah saw pain in his green eyes, but her own pain was greater. What do you want from me? She asked. Someone with your money can have any woman. Why choose a single mother working as an accounting assistant? Because you're the first person in years who sees me as Ryan, not as a bank account with legs, because you are smart, brave, honest, and because it was fun playing Cinderella with me? Sarah, stop. His voice was firm now. You know it's not that. I don't know anything anymore, Ryan. I don't know what I can believe in. Sarah stood up, grabbing her bag. Where are you going? Home. I need to think. Sarah, don't do this. Don't throw away what we have because of money. She turned before leaving the cafe. It's not about money, Ryan. It's about trust. And you broke mine. Getting on the crowded bus heading to East Side, Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just anger she felt, but a deep humiliation. How had she been naive enough to believe that a man like Ryan would be genuinely interested in her? And the worst part was that she still loved him. Despite the lie, despite the betrayal, her heart still raced when she thought of him. But love without trust was a house built on sand. It would crumble in the first storm. And the storm had arrived. November came to New York with heavy rains that flooded the streets and turned traffic into chaos. Sarah watched the raindrops slide down the office window, remembering how her grandma used to say that rain was the sky crying for the pains of the earth. If that were true, the sky was feeling exactly what she had felt for 3 weeks. Since the confrontation at the cafe, she and Ryan hadn't spoken. He had tried a few approaches, flowers left at the office reception, notes on Jessica's car windshield, even an attempt at conversation in the elevator that she coldly cut off. Ethan asked about Uncle Ryan every day, and with each question, Sarah's heart broke a little more. "Sarah, you need to talk to him," Jessica said one Thursday afternoon after Ethan had asked for the 10th time when Uncle Ryan would come back to play. "I have nothing to say to him." "You do. You have to resolve this situation. You can't stay in this limbo forever." "I can, yes. He lied to me for months, Jessica. And you've never omitted anything from anyone in your life?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "It's different." "Is it? Did you tell him about the panic attacks you had when Ethan was born, about the postpartum depression, about the fact that you thought about giving the baby up for adoption in the first weeks?" Sarah felt her face heat up. She hadn't told him. She had omitted the hardest parts of her story, painting a picture of a strong woman who faced everything alone without wavering. "That's different, Jessica." "Is it? Or did you also protect your version of the story to not scare him?" Before Sarah could respond, Jessica continued, "Sweetheart, I'm not defending his lie. I'm saying that maybe you two have more in common than you think. You both are afraid to show vulnerability." It was Friday when Sarah made a decision. She couldn't continue in the state of anger and hurt that was affecting Ethan and her own work. She needed to close the matter definitively, make it clear that there was no turning back, and move on. At 6 in the evening, after all the employees had left, she went up to the rooftop of the building. She knew she would find Ryan there. He always took care of the plants at the end of the day. The rooftop had transformed. What was once a makeshift space with a few pots now looked like a real garden. Organized flower beds, an irrigation system, plants she didn't recognize forming a small urban oasis. In the corner, an area with a table and chairs where Ryan probably had his meals. He was crouched next to a planter, carefully transplanting seedlings. He wore the same simple t-shirt as always, but now Sarah knew it was a choice, not a necessity. "Hi," she said softly. Ryan turned quickly, and the expression on his face was one of surprise mixed with hope. "Sarah, you came." "I came to talk, to end this properly." The hope in his eyes faded, but he stood up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "All right, I'm listening." "Ryan, I understand that you had your reasons for not telling the truth. I understand that it must be hard to know if people like you or your money." Sarah took a deep breath. "But I can't trust you anymore." "Sarah, let me finish." She raised her hand. "Trust is not something that can be easily rebuilt. And I can't have a relationship without trust." Ryan fell silent, looking at the plants around as if they could give him an answer. "You're right," he finally said. "I broke your trust, and I understand if you can't forgive me. No, it's about forgiveness. It's about compatibility. We are not compatible. Because of money. Because of the social differences that money represents. Ryan, you may not realize it, but you and I live in completely different worlds." "What differences?" Sarah laughed humorlessly. "Do you want a list? You have never gone without. I grew up counting coins. You had a higher education at a private university. I barely finished high school. You can travel, eat wherever you want, buy whatever you want. I plan my monthly shopping with a calculator." "And that prevents us from being together?" "Yes, it does, because when you say, 'let's go out for dinner,' you don't think twice. For me, going out for dinner means rearranging my budget for the week. When you buy gifts for Ethan, you don't. Consider that it makes me feel inadequate for not being able to do the same." Ryan fell silent, and Sarah noticed he was genuinely trying to understand. "I never thought of it that way," he admitted. "Exactly. because you never had to think. Your reality is so different from mine that you can't even truly comprehend my problems. But I can learn. I can try to understand. Ryan, you are a good person, but we don't work together. It would be an unbalanced relationship from the start, because I have money and you don't. Because you have privileges that I will never have, and that would create a constant power imbalance between us. Ryan moved closer to her, and there was intensity in his green eyes. Sarah, can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone. Ryan, that won't change. Please, just one thing. She sighed, but gestured for him to continue. When I inherited all this at 22, I had a terrible existential crisis. I tried to kill myself twice. The confession caught her completely off guard. What? I couldn't handle the responsibility, the guilt of having so much when so many people have nothing. I couldn't understand why I deserved to inherit my grandfather's life work without having done anything for it. Ryan sat down in one of the chairs at the table. I spent 2 years in therapy. That's where I learned I could use the money to do good things. Sarah sat down too, shaken by the revelation. Is that why you work in landscaping? That's why I dedicate part of the company to social projects. We install gardens in public schools for free. We teach urban farming in underprivileged communities. He looked at the plants around them. It's my way of giving back to the world a little of what I received without deserving it. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because it's not something you share on a first date. Hi, I'm rich, and I've tried to commit suicide isn't exactly an attractive introduction. Sarah felt her anger mix with reluctant understanding. Ryan had his struggles, his demons, his insecurities too. Ryan, that doesn't change the fact that you lied to me. I know, and I apologize, from the bottom of my heart. He leaned forward. But Sarah, can I ask you something? What? Don't decide now. Think it over. If our difference in financial situation is truly an insurmountable obstacle, or if it's your fear of feeling vulnerable with someone who can give you security. It's not about that, isn't it? Because I think you're as afraid of depending on someone as I am afraid of being used because of money. The observation hit home, and Sarah hated that he could read her so well. Maybe, she admitted reluctantly, then maybe we can work on this together. Find a way to be honest with each other, to build real trust. Sarah fell silent, watching the garden he had created on top of that building. There was beauty there, but also purpose, like Ryan himself, complicated, imperfect, but genuine in his intentions. I need time, she finally said. How much time? I don't know. Maybe a long time, Ryan nodded. I'll wait. And if I decide it really won't work, then I'll have to accept it. But I'll wait for you to decide with a clear head, not out of anger. Going down in the elevator alone, Sarah realized that the conversation hadn't ended as she had planned. Instead of definitively closing the relationship, it had opened a door to possibilities that scared her more than anger did, because it was easier to be mad at Ryan for lying than to admit that maybe she was in love with him despite everything, and that maybe, just maybe, he was right about her fears. But some bridges once burned were too hard to rebuild, and Sarah still didn't know if she was willing to try. December arrived in New York with the humid heat that precedes the summer rains. The streets filled with Christmas decorations, and the commerce buzzed with the typical end-of-year rush. Sarah watched it all from her desk in the office, trying to focus on closing the annual balances, but her thoughts constantly drifted to the conversation she had had with Ryan on the rooftop 3 weeks earlier. Ethan had stopped asking about Uncle Ryan, but she noticed the boy looked toward the elevator every morning, hoping to see the man who had become an important presence in his little life. Sarah, can I talk to you? Jessica approached her desk on a Thursday afternoon, carrying a folder and a strange expression. Sure. It's about the scholarship for business administration at the University of New York. Sarah furrowed her brow. What scholarship? The one you won. The paperwork arrived today. Jessica placed the papers on the desk. Full scholarship based on academic merit and socio-economic status. Evening classes starting in February. Jessica, I never applied for any scholarship. Someone applied for you. Look. Jessica pointed to a section of the documents. The application was made by an educational consulting firm, with all your academic documentation and proof of income. Everything is in order, legal. Sarah read the papers with growing disbelief. There was her academic record, her personal information, an essay about her professional goals that she definitely hadn't written, but that perfectly captured her aspirations. Who could have done this? Jessica gave a meaningful smile. Who do you think? Sarah's heart raced. Ryan. The consulting firm that submitted the application is listed here. Elite Educational Consulting. I bet if you look it up, you'll find some interesting connections. Sarah felt a mix of conflicting emotions. Gratitude for him thinking of her dreams. Anger for doing it without consulting her. Confusion because she didn't know how to react to such a grand gesture. He can't just decide my future for me, she murmured. No, but he can create opportunities for you to decide for yourself. It was Friday, December 20th, when Sarah finally made a decision. She could no longer ignore the emptiness she felt since she had pushed Ryan out of her life. Ethan missed him, she missed him, and the anger had given way to a painful longing. The scholarship had been the catalyst, not because it solved her financial problems, but because it showed that Ryan truly saw her as she dreamed of being seen, an intelligent, capable woman, deserving of opportunities. At 6 in the evening, after everyone had left, she went up to the rooftop once again. Ryan was there, as always, but this time he wasn't tending to the plants. He was sitting in one of the chairs, looking at the horizon where the sun was setting over New York, painting the sky orange and pink. "Hi," she said softly. He turned, and his expression was one of genuine surprise. "Sarah, I didn't expect you to come." "Neither did I, but we need to talk." She sat in the chair next to him, watching the plants that had grown even more in the past few weeks. "About the scholarship," she began. "Oh," Ryan looked at his hands. "You found out." "I did. Ryan, you can't just organize my life without asking. I know, it was wrong, but I saw an opportunity that you deserved to have, and I knew you would never apply on your own." "Why?" "Because you underestimate yourself, always. You think you don't deserve good things, that you have to fight for everything alone." Sarah fell silent. He wasn't wrong. "Is the scholarship real?" "Completely real. Based on genuine academic merit. I just facilitated the application process and made sure your application reached the right people." "And what if I don't accept? The spot goes to someone else who deserves it." They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the city lights turn on one by one. "Ryan, I've spent these 3 weeks angry at you," Sarah finally said. "I know, but also missing you." Ryan turned to look at her directly. "I missed you too, a lot. Ethan asks about you every day." "How is he?" "Well, but confused. He doesn't understand why Uncle Ryan doesn't come to play anymore." "Sarah," Ryan hesitated, "can I try to explain better why I lied about who I am?" "You can." "When I was a kid, whenever my parents took me to social events, I noticed how people changed when they found out how much money my family had. They became artificial, self-interested. I learned early on that money changes how people see you." Sarah nodded, encouraging him to continue. "In college, I dated a girl for 2 years. When she found out about the inheritance, she became obsessed with marrying me. Not for love, but for financial security. Ryan fiddled with a leaf that had fallen on the table. After that, I've always been honest about my financial situation, right at the beginning of relationships. And how did that work out? Terribly. Women were interested in the financial situation and pretended to like me, or they got intimidated and backed off before even getting to know me. Sarah began to understand his perspective. Until I met you, and for the first time in years, someone talked to me like a normal person, laughed at my jokes because they found them funny, not because I was rich, cared about me when I was sick, not about my bank account. So you decided to keep the lie. Deciding would be a strong word. More like, I let the situation continue because it was the first time I felt truly known by someone. But eventually, you would have to tell the truth. I was going to tell. The night we had dinner at the Italian restaurant, I thought about telling you, but you seemed so happy, so relaxed. I was afraid of ruining it. Sarah sighed. She understood his logic, even if she didn't agree with the choice. Ryan, do you understand that even though I comprehend your motives, it's still hard for me to trust again? I understand completely. And do you understand that our social differences aren't going to magically disappear? I understand, but I believe we can work on this together if you want to try. Sarah looked at the garden around her. Every plant there had been carefully chosen, planted with love, tended to daily. Relationships, she realized, were like gardens. They required constant work, attention, care. What would it look like? She asked. How would a relationship between us work with all these differences? Honestly, I don't know. It would be an experiment. Ryan turned to face her completely. But I know that you make me want to be a better person. I know that Ethan taught me I can be caring without being condescending, and I know that these 3 months have been the happiest of my adult life. Even with all the complications? Especially because of the complications. You challenge me, Sarah. You force me to question my privileges, to think about the consequences of my actions. Sarah took a deep breath. And if I agree to try again, what changes? Total honesty about money, about feelings, about fears, and patience to learn how to navigate our differences together. And the scholarship? Accept it. If you want, reject it if you prefer. It's your decision. Just don't let pride stop you from taking an opportunity that you earned on your own merit. Sarah remained silent for several minutes. The sun had completely set, and the city lights created a bright carpet, stretching to the horizon. Ryan? Yes? I love you too. The words slipped out before she could hold back, but they were true, and she was tired of hiding. I love you too, Sarah. Very much. Then let's try, but with conditions. What conditions? First, absolute honesty from now on. About everything. I agree. Second, let's take it slow, very slow. I need to learn to trust you again. I agree. Third, you teach me about your world, and I'll teach you about mine, for real, without romanticizing or downplaying the differences. I agree. And fourth, if it doesn't work out, we end it like civilized adults. No drama, no hard feelings. Ryan extended his hand. Deal. She shook his hand, feeling the familiar texture of his gardening calluses. Now kiss me, she said, smiling for the first time in weeks. The kiss was different from the previous ones. It tasted of new beginnings, of second chances, of love that chooses to grow despite the difficulties. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. Sarah? Ethan can come back to play in the garden on weekends. Sure, he missed you a lot. I missed him too. And you. Descending in the elevator together for the first time in 3 weeks, Sarah realized that mature love wasn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing to grow alongside someone imperfect. It was about planting seeds of trust and nurturing them daily, even when the soil was tough. 3 months later, in March, exactly 1 year after they met, Sarah was in her first semester of business administration at the University of New York. Ryan had implemented an educational scholarship program through his company, and Ethan called Ryan Daddy Ryan, a title he had earned through constant presence, genuine affection, and infinite patience. They still faced challenges. Sarah still felt uncomfortable when Ryan insisted on paying for expensive bills, and he still needed to be reminded that not everyone had the financial flexibility he possessed. But they had learned to talk about these difficulties, to negotiate solutions, to respect each other's perspectives. In May, on a sunny autumn morning, Ryan proposed to Sarah on the rooftop where they reconciled. The ring was simple, chosen together with her, and the proposal was made in front of Ethan, who clapped excitedly and asked if that meant Ryan would stay forever. "If your mum wants—" "Yes," Ryan replied, looking into Sarah's eyes. "I do," she said without hesitation. They married in September, in a small ceremony on the rooftop, surrounded by the plants they had cultivated together and by the people who truly mattered. The housekeeper, whom Sarah had learned to love like a true grandmother, made the cake. Ethan was the cutest ring-bearer in the world, and Jessica was the maid of honor who couldn't stop crying from emotion. During the celebration, watching Ryan teach Ethan how to water the plants, while the guests chatted in the background, Sarah reflected on the journey they had taken. It hadn't been easy, nor always harmonious, but it had been real. She had learned that true love wasn't about finding someone to complete her shortcomings, but about finding someone willing to grow together, to face difficulties side by side, to build something greater than the sum of two people. And as she watched her new husband patiently explain to their son how to care for the tomato seedlings they would plant together, Sarah knew they had found the secret that many search for their entire lives. Love that grows, that flourishes, that bears fruit. Like the best of gardens,